Safety and Justice Oregon is an advocacy organization that works towards bold and transformative change in our state's criminal justice system. As a 501c4 organization, we support and amplify the leadership of key policymakers, including legislators and district attorneys who share our values. These values include ending mass incarceration, advancing racial justice, and helping survivors of violence heal and rebuild their lives. Tonight is an opportunity for us to advance these values, and I want to give a special shout out to our co-hosts for bringing all of us together to support SJO's work. Aisling Coughlin, Arthur Towers, Barbara Ross, Diane Goodwin, Emma Calloway, Felisa Hagans, Grayson Dempsey, Iris Maria Chavez, Jake Foster, Senator James Manning Jr., former House Majority Leader Jennifer Williamson, candidate for House District 46, Con Pham, Lamar Weiss, Ricardo Lujan Valerio, Roberta Hunt, Representative Rob Nose, Robin Steele, Roy Thorpe, and Samaritan Kundin. Thank you all. Now I'd like to introduce our outstanding Deputy Director, Shannon White, to share a few words.
Thanks, Andy. And thank you all for being here tonight, so close to the election. I know we are all really distracted by the news and the potential in so many ways of this moment, and it's great to be in this virtual space with all of you. I really hope next year we can be like Iris and Teresa and be together breaking bread and sharing a toast to hopefully a much better year. You know, this year, it goes without saying, it's been a really tough year, and George Floyd's murder in May ignited one of our country's greatest civil rights movements that's really calling on us to reimagine a new public safety system. And the calls to defund and invest have made some people nervous. Other people have been calling for it for decades. And for those of us at Safety and Justice, it's a call that's perfectly aligned with our approach to shrink and innovate. You probably heard us say we want to shrink the correction system and invest in local innovations to support the people and communities most harmed and least helped. And, you know, we've seen these calls in the streets all over the country, and unfortunately, some of the Portland protests have been misleadingly elevated in the national and local media. And I think you all know, but it's worth repeating, there are beautiful, peaceful neighborhood and other marches happening all over Portland that never make the news. And the news and also law enforcement who are fearful of the candidate we supported, Mike Schmidt's reform agenda, are spreading that misinformation. And so I want to take a minute also just to note, because as I think most of you know, Mike's campaign was a big deal for us. What Mike is doing by prioritizing prosecution in his office and not spending resources on people who are exercising their right to protest is exactly the kind of prosecutor we want. He's declining to prosecute people who are protesting, and then his office is prosecuting other crimes. And this is the kind of thing that we're looking for. Like we're trying to build a world, right, where we don't arrest our way out of homelessness, or substance abuse disorder, or mental health crises. And Mike is sort of demonstrating his commitment to putting our resources where we need them. And again, that's aligned with the work we've been doing to prevent the state from continuing to invest in prisons and instead invest in programs and communities. But now the call is really to go much further, to shrink the police force, to close prisons, to have fewer people on probation and parole. And this call should incite joy, not fear, right? We all know that communities thrive and aren't over-policed, that communities thrive when they aren't over-policed, and we need strong, well-resourced communities where people get the addiction treatment when they need it. They get mental health support when they need it. You know, for too long, our racist policies have given crumbs to the people that are deemed less than by the policymakers, but now's the time to really change that. And that's work that we do here at Safety and Justice Oregon. We work in two primary areas. We help elect and support progressive prosecutors, and we help elect and support criminal justice-minded legislators. And just this election cycle, we've seen attacks on candidates for essentially being soft on crime, which is a narrative we want to get away from, and we have to protect the ground we've gained in the last several months and really build on the momentum created by the Black Lives Matter movement since George Floyd's murder. You know, we have 3 progressive prosecutors right now and more that lean somewhat progressive. We have a fantastic slate of existing and incoming legislators, some of who you heard us say hello to joining us for this call. And these are folks who believe in the humanity of everyone impacted by our criminal justice system, survivors of crime, people convicted of crime, and people who are both. And tonight we are really honored to hear from 2 amazing people who are leaders in creating healing, centering the needs of survivors, and building the world we want to envision. Our first guest speaker is Aqeela Sherrills. Thank you, Aqeela, so much for being here. All of us at Partnership for Safety and Justice have met Aqeela in different capacities. We've seen him train with crime survivors for safety and justice. He's an amazing speaker and leader and healer. He also, I learned recently just from reading his bio, was instrumental in organizing a peace treaty between the Crips and the Bloods in Los Angeles in 1992, and has most recently moved to the East Coast to work on the transformative police reform work happening in Newark. So we're excited to have you here, Aqeela. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Shannon, for having me. Andy, my good friend Amy. You know, I'm always humbled when I get the opportunity to tell my story and talk about how, you know, losing my son 15 years ago was the beginning of a different type of journey for me, especially in terms of my work, you know, at that particular point for 15 years as an activist organizer in terms of my work with the peace treaty. And I'm no novice to violence, right? You know, down housing projects. I lost many friends to one of the longest running wars in the history of this country, urban street gang wars. But nothing ever prepares you for the loss of your child. And to me, like losing Terrell inspired me to double my effort in terms of my work, to looking at finding complementary strategies to public safety in our neighborhood. Because, you know, for forever, our lives, you know, had been trivialized by labels like gangs. We didn't give ourselves those labels. The label was meant to dehumanize the person behind it and desensitize the public to the plight of these young men and women who were crying out for help in their own way. And so we, when we organized the peace treaty, it was literally a campaign to change the narrative around this war zone that we lived in. I mean, and it was a literal war zone between 83 and 2003. You're talking about 20,000 gang-related deaths that didn't include those who were permanently maimed or incarcerated for the rest of their life behind their participation. I mean, in any other war zone, I mean, because this is more lives lost in both the Palestinian, the Israeli, and the, you know, the Northern Ireland conflict combined, right? In most war zones, you'd find, you know, trauma centers that help people to deal with the after effect of war. But because these were many of the victims and the perpetrators were Black and brown, you know, young people, and we still live in a system that's built on structural violence and systemic racism and implicit bias, the cries fell on deaf ears. But you know, we were able to organize a peace treaty that changed the quality of life in the neighborhood, right? And so, you know, losing my son, you know, was tragic. But again, you know, I was determined to turn, you know, my pain into power. As we say, you know, within the work that I do with the Alliance for Safety and Justice in California for Safety and Justice, that we heal through action. And so for the past, you know, 10 years, you know, working with crime survivors for safety and justice in multiple cities across the country, this has been, you know, my life's work, because I believe that we have to center survivors' voices in when we talk about reimagining a system around public safety. You know, survivors have to be at the center of that overall strategy in terms of their healing journey. Because if you don't invest in the healing of survivors, then they end up becoming perpetrators in many cases. They have, you know, people find ways of,
a few days and, oh yeah, we're
you know, these tragedies in their own hand. And so I've been really blessed and fortunate, you know, with the work that we've been able to do in Newark, New Jersey. We've now had 4 consecutive years in a row of decreases of homicide and violent crime. And this is a coordinated strategy because we understand safety now as a shared strategy, right? That no longer again, you know, should police be the single point of contact for safety in our respective communities, right? We have to have complementary strategies, and they exist. The work that I do with the Newark Community Street Team is one of those models. And, you know, so when we talk about police reform and reimagining public safety, it can't just be about procedural justice trainings for cops and de-escalation strategies. It has to also be about, you know, investing in complementary strategies, because you can't have public safety without the public, you know. Yeah, I think that this is one of the key ways that elected officials, you know, could support this work, is that there's a multi-tiered strategy in terms of public safety. There are multiple players in this game, and survivors are at the center of that strategy. Making sure that we invest in healing infrastructure in our respective communities. I mean, it's critical. So you know, thank you for the opportunity to share with you what my experience has been, and I hope that we can all remain connected to this inflection point in history, literally, because we have to change the narrative now around what public safety is, because it doesn't always mean the same in different respective communities. And I think that you know, this is a great opportunity for us to be able to work together and move this piece forward.
Appreciated at different points hearing Aqeela talk about how if we really center our public safety solutions in the needs of survivors, we're kind of starting at the right point. And it's just a really interesting place for all of us to think about when harm is done. Like, how do we start there? And not with what we think survivors might want, but actually what survivors want, because sometimes there's a narrative that's actually not true about the needs of survivors. Our next speaker is Ximena Ospina-Todd. She is the Director of Community Stability and Support Services at the Latino Network, where she oversees a range of programs that promote safety and healing for Oregon youth, including the Community Healing Initiative in Multnomah County and the Family Navigation and Mentoring Program in Washington County. She is an inspiring advocate who's devoted her nonprofit professional life to serving youth and immigrant populations. Ximena.
Thank you, Shannon. Okay, so thank you so much for the opportunity to be here tonight. And I'm the Director of the Community Stability and Support Services Department at Latino Network. And we contract with system partners to provide prevention and intervention services for families impacted or at risk of being impacted by the juvenile justice system. Our programs are rooted in cultural beliefs and practices that elevate youth leadership, facilitate youth resourcefulness, support healing, connectedness, and mobilize forward movement for our families and youth. We invite youth to bring their whole selves into the work we do, into the buildings we occupy, into the communities we nurture and foster, and into the one-on-one work we do with each youth. We believe in having staff that reflects the experience of the youth we serve. We believe we hire staff that understands our cultural values. Our programs are led by people that look like our participants. This is very important, and this is very powerful. There are many examples to share about what we do, but today I want to highlight the how we do it, because that is what is important. Looking at how we do things assures that we're not just addressing institutional practices and implementing those, but that are recognizing and calling out the practices that feel judgmental and that have failed to highlight and celebrate the strength of those who are most impacted by mass incarceration and the justice system. When we invest in community programs like ours, we assure that we're not letting others teach our youth who they truly are, and that we are not replicating stories that are centered around our perceived deficits and mistakes, that often replicates a narrative that holds in place the same who have kept the power to themselves. I can exemplify this in many ways, but today I'm sharing the story of one of our participants. His name is Jose. Jose came to us after having been on probation for 8 months. He was heavily influenced by the gang world, had very broken relationships with his family, he had dropped out of treatment twice. He had been detained several times for probation violations and was heavily entrenched in a cycle of self-destruction. He was very much a headache for his juvenile counselor, who had tried multiple interventions without much forward movement. We got Jose in our caseload on a winter day. He was in a community monitoring program. During our first home visit with his mentor, he punched a wall, he yelled at his mom, and decided to take off from the meeting. He locked himself in the room. Our mentor felt defeated but determined. He left the house, and I remember receiving that phone call, and we made the plan that we were going to return next week. Our mentor had been in Jose's shoes before, and he knew that dreaded feeling of having to participate in all these programs that seemed so boring and irrelevant. Jose's parents were also tired of having to miss work to attend court hearings and treatment meetings, and were honestly scared of his outbursts of anger. Mom was also completely embarrassed by his behavior that day and was very uninterested in continuing to put herself in situations like that one, like that first visit. The juvenile department allowed Jose to leave the house only with our mentor. So we would pick him up and call the center, tell him that he was with us. Jose was very reluctant to engage, but our mentor kept showing up to his house and invited him to go out to eat. He went a few times, but did not muster a word. They went out for Mexican food, listened to music in the car, and the meetings were short and simple. Jose did not talk. Jose started engaging after a few outings and was particularly excited to be taken out to eat at a fancy restaurant. He said he'd never been to a place with cloth napkins and real silverware before. He kept asking to go back there. He went there several times. He also needed to complete community service, and we found a place close to his home where we could all go pull weeds and plant native plants. That day, a big group of us went. The case managers, I was the manager then, the mentors, all of us went. And after that, we went to Oaks Park here in Portland. He completed the community service hours he needed that week, that spring break, with the promise that we would go do something fun together every day after service. You should have seen him laugh at the little tiny roller coaster at Oaks Park. This is before the new roller coaster went up. And him waiting in line hour after hour to go up and down. He laughed a lot that day. Jose's parents started attending our weekly parenting classes also, with other parents of youth involved in the system. They were eager to show up and share. Jose's parents had not participated in any school-based programming before. They were often feeling shameful for being the parents of someone struggling so much. They love Jose though, they love him very, very much, and found refuge in those classes week after week. There were others going through similar situations, and Jose's parents didn't need to make excuses or explain themselves much. They show up as they were, hurt, tired, upset, but also very hopeful. During this time, the opportunity came to bring a few youth from our programs to Sacramento to attend the Community Justice Network for Youth's Western Regional Conference. Jose was nominated by staff to attend, and he had never been on a plane before. So we got him nice shoes, a backpack, and all the permissions that he needed from his juvenile court counselor. He hopped on a plane with the mentor and another youth from our programs for his first time outside of Oregon. He used this experience to share about how the system had impacted himself, but also to experience the power of being in company of others who had similar stories. And he also learned how others had used that experience to transform themselves and their communities. Of course, there were many setbacks, and he's now been out of probation for over a year. We asked him how he wanted to celebrate that day, and he requested that we take him to an all-you-can-eat buffet with cloth cloth napkins, and real silverware. So we went there. We invited his juvenile court counselor, his family, and some of the staff that he had heard while he was in detention. We celebrated together all the effort and the tears that led to that moment. He still checks in with us regularly, just because he wants to connect. In Jose's stories, I'm sharing how we created supports, how we helped strengthen and repair relationships, how we elevated his leadership, how we facilitated resourcefulness, how we supported healing and connectedness, and how mobilized him forward, him and his family. Jose's story is just one of the many stories I can share, but it's a good recent example of our commitment to the well-being of families and youth, and how we keep connected by an authentic thread of care and love. We don't talk about love in this line of work, and I invite us all to acknowledge that this work won't ever move forward if we're not invested in creating generational healing, generational joy, and self-determinations for our communities. Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Thank you, Ximena.
for sharing that story and your work. I think it goes to work we've increasingly been focused on about really the need for much greater investment in culturally specific services. You know, people can't be successful not entering or re-entering the system if they need support, if it's not support that works for them and is connected to their community and their culture, or delivered in their first language, you know, all the things that really make it a meaningful experience. And so, Ximena, thank you so much for that. And, you know, I think we're here in part to support leaders who understand what both Ximena and Aqeela have been talking with us about, so that we can get those investments into the services they need. We have the leadership to get away from incarceration and criminalization, and investing where communities need it most. I'm now going to turn it over to our fabulous board member, Felisa Higgins with SEIU, who is going to wrap it up for us and tell you why it matters to her. Thanks, Felisa.
Hi, well, thanks everyone for joining this call. I'm clearly here to talk about the most critical thing for organizations like PSJ and the Latino Network: cash money. Cash money. When we think about Partnership for Safety and Justice, and I think about the criminal justice system, a lot of people who have large donations, who write checks, who think about this work are on the other side. We're not going to get a check from a corporate prison company who wants to move into Oregon. We're not getting those corporate dollars coming into PSJ or giving to our PAC. It's not the people who are electing regressive DAs all over the country rolling us back in one of the most racist and unjust systems in the United States of America that perpetuates what Ximena and Aqeela just talked about. Those people are not on here tonight. It's us who are going to push this work forward. And, you know, we've seen how the Black Lives Matter movement has taken racial justice again and brought it to the forefront. But behind that work and behind the scenes, there are organizations like PSJ and Safety and Justice Oregon and the PAC there that have been doing this work day by day, every day, eking it out on the small dollars and donations that we're going to raise tonight. I think we are in such a pivotal moment around this election, I think, as we all know, where we've been teetering on this edge back and forth for the last 4 years. We have crossed so many lines and obligations and moral norms in this country that it will take great effort and leadership to bring us back from that. And I think when I look at the way our members often talk about how in Oregon, we have been able to build a wall against a fire that has been sweeping across our nation, that really has been coming for us to push us backward in something. So we've been able to construct and build that wall, protecting us from that fire, from that heat on policies, and the incredible work that PSJ has done on decriminalization, on Measure 11 reform, the work that the senators and representatives on this call have led that are incredibly hard and difficult and courageous votes and morally right. And so I think of everybody who's given money tonight and will give money later in the future, who will show up to the lobby days, who will show up to volunteer, who will make those phone calls, do that work, ask their friends and their family to volunteer. This is why we are the believers in hope. If we think we can take down a 300-year-old system that expanded rapidly in our lifetimes, we have hope. And so we've got to really commit and spread that hope. And you guys have all really done that tonight. And so I just want to thank everybody who's made a contribution at any level. And if you can do any more, a little bit more, dig a little bit deeper, please click the link and make a contribution. Thank you so much.
I wanted to share one more thing. I'm going to drop it in the chat box. We have two incredible speakers, Aqeela and Ximena, share their work of their organizations tonight. So if you want to go above and beyond, we encourage you to check out their work and also to support them with the donation. So I'm actually going to drop donation links to both of those organizations in there right now as well. Just want to give a big shout out to both of them for being here tonight, especially Aqeela too, because I think it's like 3 hours ahead where you are. So
It's like 10 o'clock now.
yeah. All right, I'm gonna put on some background music. Feel free to unmute yourselves and chat if you want. And thank you again so much for being here.
Bye, John Castro.
Everybody, thanks. Great event.
Yes,
Thanks,
Thanks,
Karen.
thank you, everybody.
So nice to see everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
Nice to meet everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you all so much.
Bye, Roberta. Bye, Amy.
Bye, Bobby. Bye, Bobby.
Bye-bye.
Leo, bye Talia, bye everybody.
Erica.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, Samaritan.
Keep studying, Samaritan.
I will. Bye, everybody.
So good to see you, Samaritan.
Yeah, great to see you, Samaritan.
Thank you,
Bye.
Ximena. Bye.